Hey, everybody. Welcome to my second episode of Ask Me Anything. Anita Goodesign related, or for that matter, anything else. Um, I have a little bit of a different setting right now. We're in my showroom instead of my office, so you can kind of see, some artwork, behind me. And I'm here to answer like any question you might have about our products, about our education, or about embroidery in general. I get tons of questions. One question from last week, a lot of people typed things in when I wasn't really, didn't have the time to answer everybody's question. But one of the questions was, if I'm creating a design, from, one of Anita's designs, and I want to change the colors, how do I go about that? And, to me, we have tutorials on this on my website. But the main thing is I want the designs that we create to work for you and what you already have. There's very seldom that you would have to buy something to create one of our designs or projects, maybe fabric and notions and things that you would normally purchase. But if you're stitching a rose, for example, and you don't have the exact red that I'm using, well, you simply use a different red. That's the idea, is to match it with the threads you have. Um, Occasionally we'll mix brands, we'll mix styles. I mix rayon and polyester. If I'm missing a certain color, I mean, we have thousands of colors of thread in stock, but realistically, we understand that most home embroiderers do not. So use what you have, and you substitute the colors to kind of match your fabrics or whatever else you might be creating. It really doesn't matter what we pick. I'm just trying to give you a basic idea of what to use.
All right. So let's start off with, like Steven said, some questions from last week. So a lot of people were curious about your cordless glue gun that you use to create art pieces.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Let me just, it's off screen right there. Somebody's going to slide it to me. But we've gone through every glue gun that you could possibly have, both at Anita and at the studio. Ones you would buy at Michael's, ones you would buy online. And, they never really seemed to last that long. And a lot of them didn't get hot enough. So I was at Lowe's one day buying something, obviously for something else. And I saw that Ryobi makes a glue gun. So it's battery powered, the battery's separate. The glue gun's probably about $20. That's it. Uses, hot melt glue, giant sticks. And the battery is the same battery you would use for a cordless drill or anything like that. They have different sizes, but basically you charge it up. It takes about 15 minutes to get fully hot, and then it works. And I've had this same one for a really long time. My daughter, doodled on it and kind of made it even more fun.
That's a great one. We also had people asking about new signature series. Will there be more? Is there any in the works?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sometimes with a signature series is I have a definite idea. I'm like, this is what I want to do. That's kind of how the butterflies transpired. The flowers was really, the number 3 was really about trying different ideas. For number 4, I plan on coming out with it early next year. I have about 5 or 6 ideas for like a big theme, Americana, fantasy, another quilting collection, more butterflies. We actually sent out a survey to everybody on our mailing list, and we're going through the answers right now. We had a lot of answers and a lot of requests. So I plan on coming out with 4 different SIG series in 2023, one each quarter. So that's kind of the idea, is every 3 months I have a new deluxe hardcover book with that thematic design and series that goes with it. So look for those soon. If you have suggestions, just submit them on our website or fill out the survey that just went out, I think, a few days ago.
Mm-hmm. It did. And if, like Steven said, if you're not on our email list, we will be sending those out periodically. So make sure that you are signed up. Let's see, what else? PD Fan 33036 said, if you were to teach digitizing, what software would be needed for the lessons in order to take those lessons?
That's a great question. I know I've taught probably 3 major digitizing courses in the last 20 years. What's changed in software? Honestly, very little. I think there's been more of a change on like with art prep software and things you would do before digitizing, but the nuts and bolts of what I use is really simple. So obviously to digitize, you would need some type of digitizing software. Now there's some software that you could buy online that's really inexpensive. There's commercial software like Wilcom and Tajima that are very expensive. What's in between? Well, you have some really amazing home software like Floriani. Their digitizing software is probably what I recommend to most users. It's made by the same company that makes mine. That's the first step. And then you really have to study the art of it. And again, on our education platform, if you look on our website under education and Anita's University, there is a whole digitizing university that we sell. And the designs are really based on Americana. And in that course, I give you the designs, step-by-step instructions. I give you my files so you could run my designs. And that's really how you would learn, is doing one little thing, one at a time, and you build this recipe book of creating designs.
Right. Let's see. It looks like we have Cheryl, who really enjoys the Anita's Playhouse Animal Adventures.
Yes.
Have you thought about, or would you be open to adding on to that series as a classics collection and things like that? Would you be open to expanding?
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, Animal Adventure, I remember designing that with Carol a number of years ago. It was one of our first big, premium collections. And this was way before I had kids, or right around the time, maybe when my wife was pregnant. And I designed it, and it's like, oh, I'm going to do all these things when we have kids and make them. And honestly, that never happened. My daughter has very little embroidery items because by the time we get to the end of the day, I never have time to make them for myself. But I love that collection. She was just visiting here yesterday. It was day off from school, and they came and did sewing and crafts all day. My daughter and her friends, and that's the first sample they gravitated towards. So I think it's about time to add some new animals and some new designs into that. So I think you could see that coming soon.
Great. Another question that actually came from Instagram last week was, we posted a photo of the floor, our production floor, on Friday afternoon. And several people were curious about the sewing tables that were on the Anita side of the floor and where those came from, and if someone could purchase them for themselves.
Well, so we have a few different types of tables. I remember the first set of tables from when Anita first opened, this, in Charlotte. So it was 15 years ago. My dad came down and we built them ourselves, basically out of 4x8 sheets of marine plywood. So we kind of took two of those together, got some lumber and built the legs. Because back then, I don't know, I couldn't afford bigger tables or something. So I think we built about 3 or 4 of those, and those 3 or 4 are still there. So all the cutting tables, there's a few from, Granger or industrial supply companies that are like, heavy duty shop tables. But most of those big cutting tables are made by hand. So 2 4x8 sheets of plywood, marine plywood, so it doesn't bend. And that's it. So I'm sure there's instructions online on how to build your own table, but every other one I found was never heavy duty enough to really stand that use of day-to-day pounding that we do on it, from hooping and stuff like that. So those original tables might have been painted and resurfaced, but that's still what they are. They're all homemade.
That's amazing. So we actually had 2 people ask, Chris and Lou. They have some interesting relationships with metallics and metallic threads.
Mhm.
I wanted to hear from you about your secret combination of thread. Is it manufacturer, needle, stabilizer, fabric?
Well, it's kind of all those. Everybody that does embroidery or is an embroiderer has a love-hate relationship with metallic thread. My solution is pretty easy. I just have someone else run the machine when we're doing metallic designs. But realistically, it's a combination of like 3 or 4 different things. The first thing is the design itself. Is there something different I do while digitizing if I know there's metallic thread being used? The answer is yes. I use a little less density. I make the stitches a little longer. If your stitches are too short, that's going to cause the thread to break. All right. So do I know every single time if I'm doing metallic? No. So at that point, you want to make sure you use really good metallic thread. Again, we use Floriani thread or Madeira. Madeira is probably my favorite metallic thread. It's made in Germany, runs really well, doesn't break as easy. Avoid um, inexpensive metallic thread. You'll see lots of things online and through various sites that have thread on special, and if it's polyester, probably doesn't matter as much. But with metallic, if you get the wrong kind of thread, it gets brittle, doesn't run well. Also, I tend to use a sharp needle with a larger eye for metallic. So the eye of the needle is 7511 or 8012. I'll generally run an 8012 sharp with metallic thread. It makes the hole cleaner, the thread slips through easier, and the design will run better. So those are like a few tips I've heard of people. Here's another one that actually works really well. The problem is metallic thread is coiled around that spool. So I found that larger spools work better because the wrap is not as tight. If that's not the case, you have to relax the thread before it goes into the machine. So I take a metal thread stand. They're simple. You probably have 5 of them at home, and you take the metallic thread, you put it on the metal thread stand, and you take the thread stand and put it honestly like 5 feet away from your machine. So it'll kind of look like mousetrap with that like thread running across your room, but that distance actually allows the thread to relax and run smoother into the tensioning system of your machine. See, a home machine, the thread doesn't get to travel that long. It literally unwraps, unspools, and goes right into the tensioning and needle. Whereas with an industrial machine, that thread has to travel further, so you have less problems with the thread breaking.
Wonderful. Barbara asked, why does no-show mesh shrink so badly?
Mesh shrinks. This might be a question for the stabilizer company, but any kind of stabilizer made out of polyester, usually when you're heating it and things like that. So, we've done things where we've pre-shrank it. We've, done other things to help stabilize. But anytime you're using anything with like a polyester base, I would be careful putting it in the dryer and getting it really hot. That's generally what happens when it shrinks. You could try ironing it first. That'll shrink it a little bit before you use it, if it's for that kind of product. But that's a whole another. We could do another, whole podcast or video cast, whatever this is called, about how to care for embroidery. I try to avoid the dryer with anything, but I guess sometimes it's inevitable. But they shrink a little because they're polyester.
Great. Cheryl asked, are you coming up with more tile scenes in the future?
That's a great question. I believe there was just a blog post I wrote a couple days ago that's on about the tile scenes and how they're made. I remember I did the first one, I don't know, 18 years ago or something like that, because nobody had a really big hoop. So that's how we had to do to make scenes larger. And I believe there's like 3 or 4 planned for first quarter. I'm doing one as a possible signature series. That's amazing. I believe there's pictures of it in the survey. This is an art piece I'm making that's like 8 feet wide. And I thought it would be an amazing Anita collection. And we have some, vintage ones I'm working on, as well as some Americana type scenes. So there's always going to be more tile scenes coming.
Great. Marley asked last week, and we didn't end up getting to her question, so we're going to bring it up now, is why, when making the freestanding butterflies, do you cut the fabric around the butterfly before adding the satin stitches?
I'd have to refer to that exact collection, but if we're talking about lace, are we stitching these on organza, or are we doing them, directly freestanding, which would be stitched on kind of like a wash away stabilizer? It depends on the application. Generally, if I'm doing something that's going to be trimmed at the end, like organza on the flowers I did, I would trim that after everything is cut. But it depends on the application. Some collections we've done are maybe applique with lace borders that you would trim it first because you don't want the applique fabric under the lace. So that's where each collection has a slightly different tutorial depending on that application. But I'll double check it, and I can always respond next week to that specific question on a specific tutorial.
Sounds great. We'll add that to next week's queue. We had Deborah ask, she said she recently made the eagle from the double exposure animal series.
Okay.
And had a couple issues with her fabric puckering.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions for preventing fabric puckering in the future?
Yes, that's, it's another nightmare of embroiderers. So, if the design has a lot of stitches in it, you have to stabilize properly and use the proper fabric. So, or stabilize that fabric. So I wish there was like a simple answer, but this is what always happens. I mean, you have your design. So your design could have, 1,000 stitches, or it can have 100,000 stitches. So designs differ in magnitude as to like their stitch count. Then fabric can differ from, a lightweight cotton all the way to canvas or denim. And each of those fabrics kind of handle thread differently. So generally, the more stitches in the design, the more durable your fabric has to be. All right, so how do you avoid that if you want to stitch, the double exposure design on something like cotton? Is I would use an interfacing on the cotton to make the cotton stronger. So basically, it's like an iron-on stabilizer or backing, and we'll use that on silk. I'll use it on silk scarves, like even the ones that you see behind me. Anything that's really thin, I'll stabilize first. And I know we have tutorials on how to do that on our website. If you just go in the customer center and downloads, you'll see those. And it's always one of those things that we teach. I know there's videos on stabilizing your fabric on YouTube as well that you could look up under Anita's channel that really address that. The other way to kind of combat puckering, because, stitching elaborate designs on fabric, without a doubt, can be a nightmare. So what I create a lot, and I know I'm going to do a video on this soon and a blog, is about making patches. So when you see designs like, these butterflies here, for example, they're pretty stitch intensive. The only thing here is basically thread, and all the fabric was cut away. So if I stitch this like this, basically on a durable fabric, it comes out beautiful. There's no puckering, there's no nothing. But if I stitch this on a cotton t-shirt, it might ripple and wrinkle. So you can alleviate that by making your design into a patch. So you could take something like the eagle, for example, or something really stitch intensive. You stitch it on like a polyester twill, trim away the twill, and then you can turn this into a patch and place it on your garment or bag or something like that. If it's a quilt, that's why stippling was invented, and techniques like that. So that background stitch of stippling and kind of texturizing your fabric, covers up all the puckering. So there's lots of different methods to it. But that's a great question, and it's probably something we should do another video on, because it's something that is frustrating and happens to everybody.
Absolutely. So we're having a lot of comments about this awesome art that's behind you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give the viewers an idea of what's happening with you right now and the designs that you're creating and your art?
Well, the designs behind me are actually for a secret show that nobody's supposed to know about. No, I'm just kidding. These are all pieces of art. The camera should be following me right now. That are created from leftover packaging. So, the other side of my business, which is the studio side, creates, individual pieces of art. And this is all made with leftover bags and boxes that are embroidered and manipulated. So it's all made from upcycled luxury combined with embroidery. So you'll see, I think the camera's following me up here, something like the horse and rider. This is made with like upcycled purses and bags. And these are obviously, the butterflies that are available to anybody, that are kind of glued on using that glue gun onto these boxes. And these are all one-of-a-kind pieces. So the difference with these is I can experiment and do something fun. This is basically all different kind of scraps and pieces of fabric that are embroidered and then cut out into these kind of silhouettes. So up here, I don't know if you see this one, this is a cherry tree that's all embroidered, and then all of these flowers are applied after. So with those kinds of projects, I use, it's a lot of gluing and tacking down. I teach this whole technique in SIG Series Volume 1. And that's really like embroidering on paper. and then adding things to it after. It's a totally different thing than embroidering on fabric with direct embroidery, because I could take all these objects and kind of collage them onto a background simply because they're going to be framed. So I could take a glue gun and butterflies and glue them on anything, things you can't do to a quilt or clothing because it's going to be worn. So most of these things are embroidered elements that are stitched, cut out, and then glued back together. And obviously you could see a ton of them on my Instagram page as well as my website, which is stephenwilsonstudio.com. And a lot of the designs that I do for the studio are also done for Anita, or the designs for Anita I've used in the studio. So you'll see a lot of things you might recognize from collections from years ago, or the archive, like I call them, and I'm using those every day.
Absolutely. So I think our last wrap-up question, this is one to wrap up on for today's live. Sherry asked, where do you get your inspiration for most of your designs? Do they just come to you? Is it off of the things that you are dealing with in your life at the time, or things that you're interested in? I know you recently took a trip to Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
Where you got some inspiration?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, those things come from travel. I keep a notebook full of ideas, and if I think of something that I think would be cool, like vintage Western posters, then I say to myself, well, would that be like an art idea where it's like a one of a kind thing, like the kind of like the steer that you see, or would this be like a really cool collection for Anita? So really the ideas start with like just big sketchbooks and clippings and things ripped out of a magazine, and then they kind of go into one or the other. I mean, my kids have obviously been a huge inspiration on what they're into and the clothes they pick out. So that kind of filters into like a lot of the new Anita children's collections. And then I'm inspired by vintage fashion, just everywhere. I mean, I think a lot of that inspiration came from traveling, but a lot of it also comes from, just, the history of what I've come out with. I've been now looking through the archives of things I did in 2004 and 2007 and seeing this and going, oh, this is like really cool. Things come in and out of style, and you're like, I think this would be really cool again. And maybe I'll do a new version of something that came out a long time ago. So I think it's always just, write as many things as you can down. And then, if you keep thinking about that thing, it usually turns into something, and some things never turn into anything. So and a lot of it's suggestions. I might have a customer email and say, it'd be really cool if you did, blank, blank, blank. And I would go, yeah, that is kind of cool. Just like today with the animal adventures, somebody said, oh, you're going to add to it or do more animals. And then that's what kind of inspires me. Well, if I was going to do more animals, what would those animals be, and how would I do it? So it starts off with little ideas. They go into like a roundtable meeting with artists and the rest of our team. And then we see if that actually formulates into something, or, withers on the vine, so to speak, to come back later, maybe. So any last questions there?
I think that this is going to be a wrap for this week. Thank you all so much for joining, and please continue to add your questions to the chat, and we will be happy to answer them next
Address them
week.
later. Yep. So we'll be here next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday at 1:30.
1:30.
And we will see you guys then.
Perfect. Thank you.